This is the BAM School Podcast, where we talk about business adventure and mission with your host, Buddy Rathmel.
All right, I'm here with our guest, Mike Baer, founder of the Third Path Initiative, and it's a delight. I have shared the stage with Mike. He's been a speaker at the BAM conferences for years, most recently in Silicon Valley in 2019, and unfortunately 2020 was COVIDed out, but we hope to be back in Chicago in 2022. So Mike, tell us what has been your journey to this point in your life? Give us a little background.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first, thanks for having me, buddy. It's good to see you again, even if it's on screen and not in person. And I'm like you. I hope we can get back together in Chicago next year and get the family back in business. But so quick journey. That's hard to do because it covers a lot of territory. But the short version, I came to Christ in college and ended up pastoring a church. I started a church, me and four of the guys on the Tennessee University campus, and didn't know we were doing it. That launched me into kind of pastoral ministry for about 15 years and in different places, and discovered along the way I didn't like being a pastor. I love preaching, I love teaching, I love shepherding, I love disciple making, but I didn't like the role, the way it was cast in the organized church, and felt very led of God to go out into business as a way of being among, I'll say, real people, right? Lost people in particular. I found that being a pastor was more of a barrier than a bridge. And so when I gradually left the formal pastorate and got into business, I was blessed right off the bat with everything I longed for, which is relationships with lost, struggling people who were pretty real about their struggle. I started wrestling with the question of, I had by that time 15 years of pastoral experience, 10 years of theological education, and now I was building what at that time turned into about 10 years of successful international business. How do those things fit together? That was my question, and God answered that by sending me to Kyrgyzstan, a newly independent republic in Central Asia, where really before my eyes I saw what a business person in an unreached people group area could do. Yeah. And just the corridors were open at every level of government, all the way down to the poorest of the poor in the villages. And it just clicked that this concept of business connected to God's mission and living out the gospel in a business context. And that's what I'm still doing.
Yeah.
I've done it as an employee. I've done it as a multiple entrepreneur. And now I'm trying to do it as an old man teaching young people how to do it through Third Path.
Yeah. And we'll link to Third Path Initiative in the show notes. Great resources there that I plan on using in my next BAM school as well. So thanks for putting those out. So yeah. Callie is not with us right now. You put her out, but tell us about Callie before we dive in.
Oh gosh, yeah. Callie is world famous. She's known as Callie the flag-eating dog. She's a beautiful English cream golden retriever who, as a puppy, ripped the American flag down off the front of my wife's bed and breakfast inn and ate it. And ended up being cut from neck to knees to get it out. She's now had 4 surgeries to remove foreign objects, and she's had others. Let's just say they handle themselves naturally, but she is a chronic eater of things. She now has to wear a muzzle. If she comes in, you'll get to see it. But she has her own Facebook page called Callie the Flag-Eating Dog. And we launched it in Australia just as a joke. And now she has hundreds of followers.
Yeah.
What did Callie eat next, and how did you get it out?
Yeah. I tell my wife, I'm like, we take our cat to the vet in Thailand because they're always getting in fights and stuff. And I'm like, it's cheaper just to reload. Like, couldn't we just get a new kitten? But you can't do that with pets. And yesterday when I purchased the car that I just got, it was a completely new level. The wife goes, yeah, it's my fault we have 2 matching 2020 RAV4s in the driveway because I got the first one with the limited package, but didn't realize that didn't have the heated rear seats for their golden retriever. So they bought another identical one with the limited package, with the additional package of the heated rear seats. And I thought, that is next level taking care of your dog.
I'm not there yet. I don't know that I will be.
Yeah. So you're definitely one of the founding fathers in the current business as mission movement. And you talked a little bit, but what kind of prepared you to be kind of an ideal bridge between the business world and the theological world?
Yeah, I think so. I guess from a skill set or mindset perspective, I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always been starting things. When I was in seminary, I started a couple of different businesses to help pay the bills. So I was always comfortable in business. I always liked business. But like I said earlier, it was in Kyrgyzstan that I began to see the two coming together. That to me was the big thing. I think, it was not a practical revelation, really kind of a theological revelation. I think the other thing is I'm a good synthesizer, buddy. My mind works to take things that don't seem to fit together and figure out how they do fit together.
Yeah.
And that's where the thinking about business as mission came from.
Yeah.
Where we really saw it connect after worked in Kyrgyzstan for 5 years, didn't live there, going back and forth, helping people start businesses. And then we discovered that the Christian community, a very small persecuted minority, it's a Muslim country, the main persecution was economic. They kicked out of their family, their village, their clan. That meant slow starvation. And so the very small Christian community around Kyrgyzstan, they were starving.
Yeah.
And so we decided we'd focus there and help them start businesses, and God just touched it.
Yeah.
And it ended up operating in 37 different countries. The process that we created.
That's awesome. Wow, really cool. So what
I have a gift for being in the right place at the right time, with no clue what's going on. That's really most of God's dealings with me. It's like I wake up and, okay, how did I get here?
Yeah. So along that line, what would you say are some of your spiritual giftings, and how have you seen God use them?
Yeah, so I'm a pastor at heart, a pastor teacher, depending on how you interpret Ephesians 4, and I still do that.
Yeah.
I'm a pastor teacher in the context of business. I love being able to, whether it's the Word, of course, but also just like I'm designing a course right now on business acumen.
Yeah.
And doing it from a biblical perspective, but still being able to take complex processes and complex concepts and distill them so that people can understand and apply whatever it is. That I think is at the core of my gifting.
Yeah.
So I'm an equipper. I think when it's all said and done, I love equipping people to do what God's called them to do.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to when we run BAM School, our 8-month school in America in 2022. I'm looking forward to either bringing you in or coming and visiting you, but somehow having you equip our students during that
fun.
process. So what are some of the projects that you're currently involved in? You mentioned some of what you're doing with the third initiative. You want to expand a little bit on what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So Third Path Initiative is kind of the headline. We're having been involved directly in business development around the world up until 2012 when I handed it over to somebody else to take on. I felt like there was a lot there that was very inefficient, right? Sending teams, in this case of American Christian business people, to Kyrgyzstan or Thailand or any of the number of other places that are out there. It's great experience, very powerful, but very expensive, very limited in its impact for dollar. So we started looking for a way to really equip the next generation of BAMers, but to do it in a cost-effective way.
Yeah.
That led to Third Path, which is an online, business as mission portal, educational platform. Yeah. Really is what it's. So that's number one, right? Just finding people to design courses, loading them up, marketing that, trying to get the word out. That's sort of the main project. The other is I've got a consulting company I started, as I mentioned to you earlier, just to pay the bills, right? I mean, I love doing it, don't get me wrong, and that's ministry for me too.
Yeah.
But, my real passion is Third Path. And then, as we were chatting before the podcast, I quote, retired last year. I didn't, but I left the corporate world. And so my third project is really getting reacquainted with my wife through hiking.
Nice. Yeah. So I imagine that you're in the mountains, right? Are you in, is it the Blue Ridge? Yeah. Is that what that is?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Blue Ridge Mountains, beautiful area, gorgeous area.
Yeah. So I'm I don't know, a couple 2.5 hours from you in a different part of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And almost every day that I'm here, I either hike a part of the Appalachian or just one of the trails around here as my exercise. So I'll have to stop in and join you guys on one of your hikes one of these days.
Yeah, we've got great hikes around here, and I'll come up and do the same.
Yeah.
So here's Callie if you want to see her. Let's get this. And you see the muzzle.
Yeah.
That is her. She thinks it's punishment. It's actually her life preserver. I don't think she'll survive another surgery.
Yeah. So I'll have to get a picture of her for the show notes for those that are just joining us on the podcast and not the video. So what do you enjoy most about your current life situation and what you're doing?
It's interesting. I was used to running, 100 miles an hour, hair on fire, never sitting still. And I love that. I mean, I'm kind of wired that way. I'm hyperkinetic, but I think what I've really enjoyed, buddy, is to slow down.
Yeah.
I'm not a retired guy. I want to make that very clear. But I don't have to go 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to really enjoy the pace. It was hard at first, to be honest with you. It was quite hard. But now being able to slow down, being able to take walks, being able to take Callie out for walks, to think.
Yeah.
There's a great book out that's fairly new called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Yeah, great book. Yeah.
Gosh, what a good book. And I've really tried to take that to heart and just slow the pace of life just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were in Silicon Valley, we got to meet John Ortberg because Nancy, of course, was one of the speakers as well. And so I was asking about that phrase, and I think it was one of his mentees that actually wrote the book.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great phrase. I mean, just in that phrase, you go, okay, yeah, I need to make some changes. Like we're definitely as Americans and type A personality people often hurry too much. I love in John Ortberg's book when he tells the story of, was it Dallas Willard that said that to him?
Yeah.
How he was like, okay, that's great. What's next? And he just repeated that again. Yeah. No, the ruthless elimination of hurry. Like,
yeah, the author's name is John Mark Comer.
Yeah.
And he's definitely a mentee of Ortberg. And then I had this driven home to me, buddy, when I was in Kyrgyzstan one time. At that time, translator, soon to become really almost an adopted son, named Ibek. But I said, I want you to pick me up tomorrow at 9, or we'll meet at 9. And he said something, it was brilliantly said. He said, okay, is that going to be Kyrgyz time or businessman time?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's the difference? He said, well, Kyrgyz time will be sometime tomorrow morning. It's businessman time. It'll be 5 minutes to 9. I said, well, this time we're going to do businessman time.
Yeah.
But even back then, 30 years ago, God was trying to say, Mike, just slow down. You don't have to do it all today.
Yeah. I was looking at used cars for a while, and I met an appointment to meet a guy at a place, and after 15 minutes he didn't show, I took off. And then 5 minutes or 6 minutes later, he calls and says, hey, I'm here. And I said, hey, we were supposed to meet 21 minutes ago. And he said, oh, I hit traffic. And I said, listen, in Roanoke, Virginia, there aren't 21 minutes of traffic that are going to slow you down. But then when I met him, I won't mention the country he was from, but it all clicked. Like, he wasn't from America, and 21 minutes was probably about early for him,
Yeah,
and
totally different cultural perspective.
Yeah, and thankfully living over that, I was like, okay, I put on my American expectation because I'm in America, but it wasn't quite met. So what have been some of the biggest adventures or challenges for you in whether it's working in an American context or working overseas that you've experienced over the years?
Oh, wow. So I'd say in the States, it's more just being able to articulate the gospel in a business context. It's one thing to live it, which is really the most important thing, but just finding ways to bring the gospel into a conversation without being cheesy, and programmatic and, hey, do you think about Jesus today kind of stuff? So that's always a challenge. Internationally, not so much. I mean, there's actually I found a huge openness to the gospel in a business context, particularly when they realize you're not a missionary, you're a business person. For me, I guess this might sound silly, buddy, but food has always been a challenge to me.
Yeah.
Some of the places I've gone to in the world, some of the foods have been just really, really different. And I've had to learn how to pray and ask God just to help me eat with joy what is not naturally joyful.
Yeah.
Culture, I love the culture changes. I've always respected other cultures. That's not been a big challenge. Jet lag's never been a big issue. I will say this, though, in the context of, doing business as mission, which is it's real business. You and I talk about this all the time. It's real business, real profit, real ministry, real mission. I mean, everything about it's real.
Yeah.
And business is difficult in many places in the world, right? I mean, there's in the countries that are poor, underdeveloped, with corrupt governments. I mean, business is hard. It can take literally a year or more to register a business trying to do it, legally and ethically without bribery. So, getting kind of away from the joking about food, it really is. I find that to be a big, big challenge, and I really feel for our brothers and sisters who are launching businesses and trying to scale businesses in places where the government, for whatever reason, corruption, ignorance, tradition, seem to be very anti-business.
Yeah.
So
we in Thailand, where I live currently, it's $60,000 to start a business minimum as a foreigner. And it doesn't matter if you're, just a little tiny business, and the time and complexity and all of those kind of things. And one time when I was starting a business in Thailand, I was at my other business in Cambodia, and my lawyer said, you have to be back tomorrow to get this piece of paper. And I said, I can't. I'm in Cambodia. I'm not planning on coming back for a couple weeks. And he said, well, if you don't come and get this paper tomorrow, you have to start the whole 3-month process over. And I was like, okay, I'll be there tomorrow to pick up the piece of paper.
On my way.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a reality that most Americans, as frustrated as we get, and I'm going to speak as an American, that's where I live too. I think most Westerners could go along with this, but as frustrated as we get with our government and red tape and bureaucracy, it's much more challenging in many other countries, and it just makes it hard to start businesses and create jobs and all the things that we believe in as business as mission practitioners.
Yeah. And the food thing, when my first year or so in Thailand, I at one point had 2 parasites and an amoeba at the same time. Like I had no energy. I was jaundiced, which was because of the amoeba was impacting my liver. And so after I got better, it was actually our friend Mark Plummer that said, I think you have parasites. And I went and got checked, and sure enough, I did. And so after that, I was telling a group of missionaries one night, I'm not going to be eating the food in the villages anymore. And one of them was trying to tell me and just encourage me, like, well, eat a little and, be culturally sensitive. And he said, there's this one guy that he would go to the village and he would always eat everything, and the villagers loved him. So if you want to be loved, basically he was saying, like, eat all the food when you go. And I said, oh, is he still around? Like, and they're like, no, he died when he was 40, but until he was 40, everyone loved him because he ate everything. So.
Oh, that's why. Well, I did eat it. I never refused to eat it, and I never got a parasite or an amoeba, thankfully.
Yeah.
But that's tough one. I mean, and my almost adopted Kyrgyz son now, when he was over here staying with us one time, and I was asking him about it, he didn't like American food.
Yeah.
So it's not one's good, one's bad. It's what you grew up with, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we had an orphanage in Cambodia, and I remember one time asking the kids what they like to eat, and when I heard they had never had pizza, I was almost brought to tears. What? You've never had pizza? And so I'm like, we got to get a pizza. And so we went out, we got them all pizza, and they hated it. It was like, give us our rice and whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of the dreams that you're pursuing right now?
Well, so part of it really is just it's been the dream from the very beginning of, I guess, the modern movement. Those of us who were around when God began to move is seeing the true globalization of BAM.
Yeah,
it's not it's the centrality of America in general in missions is declining.
Yeah, as
other nations are rising up and becoming the leaders.
Yeah,
particularly South and Central America, certain Asian countries. And I think the same thing's happening in BAM. The business's mission is truly now got such a global flavor.
Yeah.
You know, English is the language of business, but that's just a common language question. It has nothing to do with culture.
Yeah.
And that's a joy for me to watch and to be a part of. You know, there's different organizations that are focused on global collaboration, like the one, you know, you and I both know is BAM Global,
Yeah.
right? And the Business Mission Resources Group that Joe and Mark and you guys started it in Thailand. But that's become so global that to me is that's mission one. That's my number one dream, I guess. And the other is really focusing on the young people, and I don't mean high schoolers, but I just believe there's a chance for us to capture a lot of bright, passionate young Christians coming out of college and grad school, and you know, in their 20s and maybe early 30s that still have the ability to go and start businesses in other countries. That's my heart. That's really my dream.
Yeah, that's great. A friend of mine who actually, you know, kind of like you, he was just in the right place and started a movement in the Philippines over 26, 27 years ago now. Him and one Filipino discipling 4 guys. Now, 27 years later, they quit counting at like 1 million people that had come to Christ, 4 ministries that have sprung up. Half of the cops that are at the second level below the head cop in the Philippines, and about 40,000 cops are now believers because of this disciple-making ministry. But the guy who started that has a picture now of, he's not necessarily the one, he uses the picture of a wave, and he's like, I'm no longer the one surfing, like hands-on making the disciples, but I want to be the guy on the wave runner towing these guys into waves that are, you know, bigger than what we were doing. And I just thought of that as you were talking of like, now you're the guy on the wave runner towing these other guys into the disciple making bit and training them and launching them and helping them. And
well, that's even why we chose the name Third Path. When we began to observe that when you come out of college or you come out of grad school and you love God and you love business, the system says you have to make a choice between the two.
Yeah.
You have the business path or the ministry path. And that's why we decided that there was a third path. And that literally is that's our message, is there's a way to do it all.
Yeah. What are some ways or who are some people that you've seen walking that third path well in corporate America?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a few years ago, you could only point to a handful of companies like ServiceMaster, Beckett, Bob Beckett's group, that were doing it publicly. It was really not, Chick-fil-A. I mean, there were a handful out there, but they weren't talking about it. I mean, it was kind of all underground. And as it's become more and more mainstream to talk about the integration of business as mission or the integration of work and faith, it's been fun to watch a lot of things happen. For example, there's a recruiting firm based out of Raleigh called Turas Group. The founder's a guy named Mike Thompson. He's got a missions background, he's got a ministry background, he's got a business background. But they're a recruiting firm that has chosen as their public mission statement, redeeming the people business. Yeah. And they are seeking to bring ethics and fairness to the way people are recruited globally, right? The migrant workforce as well as their clients here in the U.S. They pray with their clients. They pray with their candidates if they'll let them, of course. They're not obstreperous. They're very gracious. Well, that's one that really comes to mind. Henry Kastner and Sovereign's Capital. Those guys have really kind of supercharged the business and work and faith initiatives around the world, but particularly in the West. They're Silicon Valley based. There's a staffing company in Atlanta called Amplio Recruiting that planted itself right in the middle of a UN resettlement community in order to provide jobs for immigrants, but all in the name of Christ. Yeah. And so, you're seeing more and more of that sort of thing happening. Yeah,
that's great. One of the things that I've seen, or just, hearing stories about moving with God around the world in business, is a lot of people starting, and kind of like the Turas group does. We actually had a podcast with someone from the Turas group recently, and but just how they start with ministry. Is there a way I can help you? Can I pray for you? And as I started seeing people around the world doing that, I thought that's a lot of times how the disciples or Jesus started in Scripture. Like, what is your need? How can I help you with that need? Instead of like as a kid, I hitchhiked across America when I first graduated from high school, and I felt like it was my duty as I got in the vehicle with someone who picked me up to like share the Romans road within the first 30 minutes of being with them. And thankfully the next year I learned a little bit more about walking in step with the Spirit instead of being a hard-nosed share this message. But just seeing more and more, whether it's in Google or Facebook or different places where people are just coming in with a spirit of helping and prayer and service, and then seeing God use that to allow them maybe to share the story of how they came to the Lord or the gospel message or whatever. And it's kind of neat. You see that in a lot of countries around the world where there's a real movement of the Spirit, that it's starting with this desire to come in as a servant,
Yeah. Well, and you think about it, isn't that the basis of all business?
Yeah.
Right? What need do you have that I can meet?
Yeah.
You need food, I'll become a grocer. You need health, I'll become a doctor. You need, that goes back to the very basics of business.
Yeah.
Find a need and meet it.
Yeah. And it's neat, like you're talking about the Turas group, how people are really like they're redeeming the people business. We're starting to see this in a lot of different businesses, that someone can come in. Next Door Photos is a company that they do they do photos of houses, but then that day they're sent to the Philippines or other countries around the world. They're edited, they made to look better. And the next morning when the client wakes up in America, they have those photos ready to go with a 24-hour turnaround. And so they're not only providing a great service, but they're doing it in a way that it's more effective and more cost effective, because they're bridging a couple different countries at the same time to create this. Yeah. So really, really neat things that are going on. Well, any last word of advice that you would give our listeners that want to be used of the Lord in the business context in America?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's a whole new podcast, buddy. But the good news, I just say jump in.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite phrases is Aslan is on the move.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to go start something that's not there. I mean, you can start a business, but you're getting into a stream, you're getting into a river, you're getting into something that's already moving. Yeah. And so just jump in and trust God to lead you, guide you, and meet you along the way. For me, the last 30 some odd years of being involved in this, and really 45 years of being a believer, has been just one amazing movement in God in my life after another, usually not seen until it's over. Yeah. I wish I could say, oh, this river's great. Yeah. I don't. I'm not that sensitive, but I look back and go, wow, that's cool how that worked out. So get in. Yeah. Don't wait. Jump into the BAM school. I think what you're doing is amazing. Jump into that, whatever, join something, get with some guys, some brothers and sisters, and just do it. Yeah.
Great. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you or find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah. So go to thirdpathinitiative.com, and that's probably the best way. There's a box there. You can sign in. You can go to info@thirdpathinitiative.com. You can contact me directly, Baer at thirdpathinitiative.com. And I'll do my very best to respond to anybody that reaches out. Please reference this podcast, so that I can know how you heard about us. And I know that if you came through Buddy, you're on the level. How about that?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Mike. It was great. Just getting a chance to catch up and hear about what God's doing in your life and what's going on in the broader global BAM movement. So thank you so much.
Most enjoyable. Thanks for having me, buddy.
BAM School, facilitating a global, self-funding, disciple-making movement through business. Thanks for tuning in to the BAM School podcast. Find show notes, free courses, resources, and more at forbam.com.